on between Cat 2 and Cat 3 with the 105-mile-per-hour winds. Most recently located 2 a.m. local time at 18.3 north, 65.2 west, and at 2 a.m. that was midway between Culebra and St. Thomas. Both islands experiencing wind gusts in excess of 100 miles an hour, actually sustained winds in excess of 100 miles per hour, and gusts above that. The 127-mile-an-hour gust was actually reported by ham operators from St. Croix a little earlier in the day. I would not be surprised if some of the higher elevations on St. Thomas would have similar reports. If you ever took the taxi up to Mountaintop there out of Charlotte, Amala, you know that's up there 1,500 feet and up in the wind field of this hurricane. Still moving northwest at 9. That is the good news. It is now moving away from these islands, so conditions will be improving. And luckily, with the interaction with the islands, the pressure has not changed. So at least in the last several hours, it has not deepened any further. Your warning still in effect for Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. These will stay up, I would imagine, past daybreak and on into the day Saturday, even though the storm system pulls away. Hurricane-force winds still lag to the east and south of the system, and then we'll probably go with tropical storm warnings due to the wind field pulling away. With the northwest movement, hopefully we don't go much beyond the hurricane watch for the Dominican Republic. Again, look for updates again down toward 5 a.m. local time. Again, apologies on the satellite. This is aging as the night goes on. It's due to a number of problems, but just realize this is not the most recent picture, and the location may be off just a little bit. It actually clipped the western end of St. Thomas and through the western eye wall closer to Vieques. So St. John may have been a little insulated from this than it looks on this particular picture. So let's show you a radar which has some images that are a little more recent than what we just showed you with the satellite, and that definitely shows the eye now pulling away to the north of St. Thomas. Notice St. Thomas, that's right on the airport on the island, was on the eastern side of the storm system, so it really just clipped the western side of the island. But there, the harbor city, I imagine, really taking a direct hit. 3 to 5 foot storm surge with 10 to 12 foot seas above that. That harbor that they've just redone, I imagine, really took it on the chin. So it's going to be a while before St. Thomas recovers from this one, as they've taken a direct hit. And would you believe this is 6 years to the weekend since St. Croix took a direct hit from Hurricane Hugo. People ask me, Bill, how do you remember these things? I met my wife that very weekend, distracted by a hurricane. She knew she was in trouble then. There's an idea of the wind field at the present time. Your tropical storm force winds are getting into the eastern side of Puerto Rico near Roosevelt Roads. We're having some gusts near hurricane force, and this thing is continuing to plod off to the northeast. So the good news with this is that conditions will be improving once we get down toward daybreak and thereafter, and it is continuing to the northwest. Coming up next.
Croix, St. Thomas, and St. John. People are missing, and we've had loss of life. Thanks for tuning into the Weather Channel. I'm Mike Seidel.
And I'm Keith Westerledge. Some residents are saying the storm was worse than Hugo in 1989. Winds were reported at more than 110 miles an hour. And that's our top story. With ferocious winds of more than 115 miles per hour, Hurricane Marilyn raged through the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico earlier this morning. These aerial shots were taken near the eastern part of Puerto Rico, where the eye passed over the tiny island of Vieques. Homes were torn apart and airplanes tossed aside and towers toppled. At least 3 people are reported dead and 100 more are missing in St. Thomas. President Clinton has declared the U.S. Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico disaster areas. The Federal Emergency Management Agency sent rescue, medical, and communication teams to the area. The hardest hit area was St. Thomas, and officials are not letting news crews on the island until later this weekend. However, we will have video from St. Thomas here on the Weather Channel later on tonight. Earlier today, we spoke with Neil Blyden from ZBVI Radio in Tortola, the British Virgin Islands. Tortola is just 20 miles east of St. Thomas, where the eye of the storm passed over. Here's how Neil explains the conditions during the storm.
It was very strong, rugged winds, which you could hear it whistling like a freight train wrapping around the buildings. But BVI is very developed and built very well, so we did not have experience a great deal of damage. There was some house roofs lost. There was the trees are pretty stripped of their leaves and so forth, and there's some damage to the highways and there's some marine damage.
And the good news tonight is the hurricane, even though it is continuing to strengthen, is pulling away from the islands. So things should slowly calm down, but again, reports that we have indicates extensive damage from the islands here. The hurricane slammed into the islands as it was actually strengthening. It continues to slowly strengthen this evening. The latest advisory has the winds up to 115 miles per hour. If you're plotting, that's 20.1 north and 66.7 west. That's where the eye of the hurricane is located. About 120 miles or 125 miles north-northwest of San Juan, Puerto Rico. Continues to move northwest at 10 miles per hour, and the pressure has just slowly dropped. That's one of the things that we're watching. The good news also is that all tropical storm warnings and hurricane watches have been discontinued from the islands here on over to Hispaniola. Now, look, the eye here still indicates a well-developed hurricane. We see it centered in this area of convection, indicating that it hasn't weakened, and we expect it to actually strengthen maybe a little bit more here over the next 12 to 24 hours. There are still some squalls coming through the islands, but things will be improving. Still some high surf coming in from the north, and that could cause some beach problems here. The system is expected to continue moving northward, and the rain bands, as I mentioned, wrapping around the eye. Here's the eye. Fortunately, the system continues to pull northward. The question now is it going to be affecting the United States? Looking from Florida on toward the east, the good news is right now it looks as if it's going to continue that northwesterly track and eventually turn more toward the north because of the continued weakness along the east coast that we've seen pull Felix north and eventually east, and Luis, the same area, last week. That's the forecast at the present time. The forecast also calls for the hurricane to strengthen, so it's something we're definitely going to watch. Farther on toward the east, we have a couple of tropical